Thank you so much for joining me on this journey on how to be a better global citizen. So, this was a journey that I myself had to learn about. I was volunteering at the YMCA, which is an organization that's predicated on smoothing the transition of refugees from their country to America. But I was always working in the warehouse in the back, packaging clothes and toilet paper, basic supplies that we would hand out to the refugees to help, get them sorted for the first few months they were in this new country. But one day I was given the opportunity to become a teacher's assistant for a citizenship class in the YMCA. It was basic. It was basically things like what we do during the 4th of July, what we eat during Thanksgiving. I never really registered things as important, but when I was teaching them about we us blowing up fireworks or eating turkey, they were learning with such a passion and jogging down notes. They were hanging on every single word that I was saying, and it made me want to think deeper about the actual role I was playing in the YMCA. What exactly was our purpose in trying to smooth transition? What do they go through while going from their homeland that they were so accustomed to a and what global crises do I have to be more aware of in order to be more aware, a better global citizen, basically. So I first turned my attention to some of the misconceptions I had about refugees. I was very confused between the difference between them and immigrants. I sort of associated them in my mind, but I had to learn that refugees, they didn't have much choice when it comes to coming to this country. They were officially classed by the UN as people that are in fear of persecution in their home country and are being protected internationally, while immigrants are simply people who come a country not from their origin to another country. So this is an important distinction when we talk about the policies surrounding them and what we as a society need to be aware of, as the amount of choice that both of these groups are given is a huge distinction in terms of how we approach dealing with them in our modern society today. But I also had to learn more about the context behind this crisis, this humanitarian issue. In terms of the US, it all started in 1891, where the Congress officially instituted a organization that allows the transfer of immigrants into the country, but refugees were also placed under the same umbrella. In 1910, the US had its first influx of refugees during the Mexican-American War, where thousands of Mexicans fled across the border in fear of their home country. In 1945, President Truman launched a directive that basically allowed expedited admission of refugees into the United States. And then in 1948, the Displaced Persons Protocol allowed for more and more refugees to come in response to the displaced persons that came as a result of World War II. And they were allowed into the US under the current quota laws, which had a max cap of refugees to about 17,400. Since then, many different refugee crises erupted around the world in countries like Hong Kong, Cuba, and Hungary. But the main one that launched a turning point for America was the Vietnam War. In 1980, in response to the Vietnam War, President Jimmy Carter launched the Refugee Protocol, which increased the cap space of refugees in the United States from 17,400 to 50,000. It's almost more than double. And since then, more and more global crises have erupted around the world that made the US have to contribute more supplies, more troops, and allow more refugees into the country. But I wanted to become more aware of these global crises. What is such a huge refugee crisis, especially in our modern times? Well, I learned that there are 5 main countries that are contributing to the refugee crisis. It's Syria, Myanmar, South Sudan, Ukraine, and Afghanistan. In Syria and South Sudan, the situation is very similar. Harmless anti-government protests, including teenagers spraying graffiti on a wall, has led to crackdowns. That's led to widespread violence, humanitarian issues, and global hunger crises. In Myanmar, the crisis is revolving around the Rohingya people. The Rohingya people are a separate nation within Myanmar as a country, but they are becoming more and more targeted towards violence and a lack of votes and citizenship, which makes them officially classified under the UN as people who need international protection. In Afghanistan, the unstable political rule of the Taliban has made specific minorities such as women become targets of unfair laws and unfair treatment that's made them fear for their lives. And the combination of global warming has led to a unsureness in terms of being able to supply food. And then in Ukraine, the ongoing war with Russia has made Ukrainians fear daily about bombings and the nervousness around the US being able to supply the correct amount of troops in order for them to be able to stay afloat as Russia increases its attacks more and more. But once they come into this country, I wanted to know more about their experiences, their issues. What exactly was the YMCA aiming to ease? Well, I learned that there were in fact 4 main stages in refugee integration into the United States. First phase is the honeymoon phase. They're more relaxed. They get to look outside and don't see a war-torn homeland. They instead see opportunities, built-up buildings. They are able to feel safer in their environment as they know that they're able to live a life that they couldn't live back in their homeland. But in stage 2, the culture shock phase, it sets in that they are in a completely different homeland. They're completely different country from their homeland. They don't speak the language. They don't understand the culture. They struggle to get things like doctor's appointments and jobs, and it becomes harder and harder for them to be able to live their daily life as anxiety and depression starts to set in. But in stage 3, they're able to develop a daily routine. They're more acclimated to the culture, and they're able to develop a sense of community, a sense of humor. They're able to get a little bit of happiness back, and they're able to speak the language a little bit more. And then finally, stage 4 is full integration. They're able to speak the language fluently. They're able to get a job, have a good community, and have a stable surrounding that's allowed them to be able to live their life in peace. So what I learned from this whole journey, all my research, was that the experiences that refugees have had not only make them brave, but adaptable. They have to not only be brave enough to leave their homeland, which was all they knew, but they also have to be adaptable enough to come to this country and be able to learn a culture that is not actively facilitating their ability to learn it. So I decided that when I was speaking to refugees in the YMCA, came from such different cultures and communities around the world, like Turkey and Cuba, I wanted to not only listen to them, but understand them. Because it's with their eyes, their understanding of this culture that we simply do not have. They're not accepted into this culture. They're not born into this culture. They have to basically learn it. They have to make it a part of themselves. And it's with this sense of identity and fresh set of eyes that we're able to have new perspectives that can influence our society as a whole. And if I wanted to teach you guys one thing here today, it's that to be a true global citizen, it's not only about being empathetic, being compassionate, but also about being able to listen.